This is The War Empire, a podcast where the past meets the future.
Welcome back to The War Empire. In today's episode, we're taking you back to the summer of 479 BCE, the Battle of Plataea. This wasn't just another skirmish in the Persian Wars, it was the showdown that would decide the fate of Greece. Get ready for a tale of bravery, strategy, unexpected twists, and the unlikely unity of a bunch of city-states that typically couldn't agree on anything. Before we get to the battlefield, we need to set the scene. The Persian invasion of Greece had been a real roller coaster, and by the time the summer of 479 BCE rolled around, it had already been a long and exhausting war. A year before, the Greeks had scored a massive victory at the Battle of Salamis, where the Athenian-led navy defeated the Persians in a naval showdown that would make any action movie director proud. The Persian king Xerxes wasn't giving up on his dream of conquering Greece just yet. Realizing he couldn't keep his entire army in Greece without stretching his supply lines, Xerxes took most of his troops and went back home. But he left behind a powerful force led by his cousin Mardonius, along with some clear instructions. Take control of Greece or don't bother coming back. So, with that motivational speech ringing in his ears, Mardonius spent the winter planning his next move. By early 479 BCE, both sides were getting ready for what was going to be the final showdown. On one side, you had the Persians, led by Mardonius. The numbers here are a bit sketchy, but it's estimated he had somewhere between 50 and 60,000 men. The Persians also had some allies among the Greeks, most notably the Thebans and other city-states that had chosen to side with the Persians. Not every Greek city was on board with fighting the mighty Persian Empire, especially if it meant getting crushed. On the other side, you had the Greeks, who had somehow managed to form a united army despite their usual squabbling. This coalition was led by the Spartans, with General Pausanias in charge, and included troops from Athens and a whole bunch of other city-states. Altogether, they had about 30,000 troops, of which around 12,000 were heavily armored hoplites, the backbone of the Greek infantry. Now, what makes this situation so unique is that the Greeks had to put aside their own rivalries. You've got to understand, these guys weren't used to working together. The Athenians and Spartans, for example, typically viewed each other as the annoying cousin who always shows up to family gatherings just to pick a fight. But the Persian threat was serious enough to get even them to cooperate. So, here we have an alliance that was about as rare as a solar eclipse. The two armies ended up facing each other near the city of Plataea. The Greeks took up a defensive position near Mount Cithaeron, which gave them an advantage, higher ground and rocky terrain that was tough for the Persian cavalry to maneuver through. Mardonius set up his forces near the Esopus River and tried to bait the Greeks into attacking, but they wouldn't bite. The two sides just stared each other down for days, in a sort of ancient version of a Wild West standoff. Mardonius got frustrated with this staring contest and decided to shake things up a bit. He ordered his cavalry to raid the Greek positions, targeting supply lines and any exposed units. One of these raids hit a detachment of Megarian troops pretty hard, and it was only thanks to some quick thinking by Athenian archers that the Megarians weren't completely wiped out. Despite holding their ground, the Greeks were starting to feel the pressure. You see, their position had one major flaw. They were running out of water. Their supply lines were constantly under attack, and the nearest source of fresh water was too far away. Mardonius wasn't stupid. He realized that if he could just keep harassing the Greek supplies, he'd eventually force them to make a desperate move. And that's exactly what happened. After 12 days of this constant pressure, the Greeks were in a bad spot. So, Pausanias ordered a retreat to a more defensible location closer to the town of Plataea, where they could access a reliable water supply. The plan was to carry out the withdrawal at night to avoid detection, but like most plans, it didn't go perfectly. As dawn broke, some units were still on the move, and Mardonius noticed the Greeks' retreat. Seeing what looked like an opportunity to catch his enemies off guard, he decided it was time to strike. Mardonius ordered his entire army to charge across the river and attack the retreating Greeks. His plan was to hit the Spartans and Tesians at the rear while they were still trying to get into position. The Persian cavalry surged forward, firing arrows at the Greek lines and creating chaos. But the Spartans weren't about to run away. they quickly regrouped, forming their famous phalanx, a tight formation of overlapping shields and spears that was basically the ancient world's version of a tank. The Tejans joined them, and together they braced for the Persian assault. Meanwhile, the Athenians, who were further ahead and technically safe, did something heroic. They turned around and marched back into the fray to support their Spartan allies. Seeing the Athenians coming back to join the fight, rallied the Greeks, and the battle turned into an all-out brawl. For a moment, it looked like the Persians might actually break through. They had more troops, more arrows, and their elite infantry units were closing in. The Spartans began to give ground, retreating step by step. It seemed like victory was within Mardonius' grasp. But then, in the midst of the chaos, the Greeks managed to turn the tide. A group of Tejan soldiers launched a surprise attack on Mardonius' personal guard, and things quickly got messy. The Spartans saw their chance and began pushing back. The battle devolved into brutal hand-to-hand combat, with the Persians trying desperately to break through the thick wall of Spartan shields. And then it happened. One Tejan soldier broke through the chaos and delivered a fatal blow to Mardonius. With their commander dead, the Persian troops lost their nerve. The once organized assault turned into a chaotic retreat as the Persian soldiers scrambled to get back across the river and escape. As the Persians fled, the Greeks didn't waste any time. They chased down the retreating enemy, cutting down thousands in the process. Meanwhile, a Persian commander named Artabazus, who had wisely kept his troops back from the main fighting, decided to save his own skin. He ordered his men to withdraw, effectively abandoning the rest of the Persian army. The Greeks overran the Persian camp, capturing a treasure trove of supplies, equipment, and loot. It was a crushing defeat for the Persians, and a glorious victory for the Greeks. The Battle of Plataea was more than just a military victory. It marked the end of the Persian invasion and the beginning of a new chapter for Greece. The city-states that had come together for the battle, Sparta, Athens, and all the rest, had proven that they could stand up to the might of the Persian Empire. This victory laid the foundation for what's known as the Golden Age of Greece, a time when the Greeks would go on to make groundbreaking advances in art, philosophy, politics, and science. Plataea became a symbol of unity and resilience, and it taught the Greeks an important lesson. When they worked together, there was no enemy they couldn't overcome. And there you have it. The war empires take on the Battle of Plataea. It's not just a story about armies clashing on a battlefield. It's a story about unlikely allies coming together to achieve something greater than themselves. It's about strategy, courage, and yes, maybe a little bit of luck. Thanks for joining us today, and if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and share it with your fellow history lovers. We've got plenty more epic battles and fascinating stories lined up, so stay tuned. Until next time, keep your shields locked and your spears sharp.